Welcome to Commander Central, episode 299, and today is the Rifties 2021. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
Chris, welcome back to the fold. I guess you and I did a show together a couple weeks back, and Max and I have done a couple, so this is the first time we've had the three of us together since, I don't know, end of November-ish, I think?
I know, I've been missing my three-way.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Show's over.
Well played, sir. I think that will slip underneath the censors to still maintain our PG-13
I was thinking
here.
about that too after I said it. I'm like, people might understand it, some people might not, so I think we'll get away with it.
I think we'll be all right. So how's everybody doing? How's Christmas treating y'all?
It's Matrix Day. I can tell you that much.
Are you going to see it?
No, I'm going to watch it on HBO Max on my couch.
That's a good idea, particularly with COVID kicking back up. I can't say I blame you.
Yeah.
Spider-Man, though, pretty great.
Don't spoil it for me. I haven't seen it yet. I'm going to take Connor next week, probably.
There's
as
only
long
a
as the world
gazillion
still
things
is
to
alive.
potentially spoil, too. So
I mean, Batman showing up weirded me out a little, but it made sense in the
no
end.
one's ready for that. Speaking of threesomes, when Batman shows up, things get crazy.
See, I have a theory. Are you guys caught up on Hawkeye?
Yes.
I literally just finished the last episode.
Okay. So spoilers to anyone who's listening. Stop now. Fast forward so you don't hear this. But the last episode that came out, Kingpin shows up. And I really want to know if Hawkeye is in Spider-Man, but I don't want anyone to tell me. I'm just like, don't tell me. I don't need to know this.
We'll talk about it next week after you get it watched.
Okay. Sounds like a plan.
Any fun games get played this week?
Negative.
I don't think so. I missed. I didn't go to the LGS this week, and I think Chris has been busy because you guys are still finishing the last of the renovations there.
I actually played on Saturday.
Nice. What decks you play?
I played all my decks. I played my new mill deck. I played Spiders, Alesha, and Mogus. I proceeded to lose every single game because everyone hates me for some reason. And I played with Kyle and Pilar, who Pilar is from Chile, I do believe is where she's from.
I believe so, yep.
Yep. Really fun person to play with and all that.
She is a blast.
Yep. And so the biggest thing I have to say is that Kyle's a cheater. And I told him I was going to say that, and I was just going to harass the living crap out of him on the show, too. But we're playing my mill deck, and every time I play my mill deck, someone has a card in their deck or in their hand that just completely obliterates me, and he proceeds to play Laboratory Maniac on turn 3 and just laughs at me.
Nice.
As I'm just milling, just tons of cards off him, and I could not find any removal. I'm like, this is so not good.
Oh, no.
Now that message from Kyle makes a lot more sense. Thank you for the context.
Yeah.
I mean, he gave you a chance. He had it out in play. So, I mean, if you would have drawn your card, you could have dealt with it. But yeah, that's
pretty much all he did was sit back with counter magic and in his
wait.
Gavi cycling deck. Yep, and anything I went to kill it with, he'd just counter it and then just be like, "Mwahaha!" Keep milling me, and I'm like, this sucks so bad.
Oh, that's rough. I have ran into that before for sure.
Yeah, because his deck is not built to be a Labman combo deck. It's just in there because he draws so many cards with Gavi. He wants that extra win con type of thing. So it fit right into that perfect subject of, if he had that out, he's going to win the game, and then I have to deal with it then. And such a good play. Did
you guys get the second half of the store open back up yet, or is everyone still crammed into the one room?
Oh, it's open. It's been open since last week, Wednesday, I think, is when we opened it up. Something like that.
Oh, so like right after the day I was last there. So.
Yep. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I probably won't be able to play this week either, just because of Christmas stuff I've got going on the week coming up. But I'll plan on heading back after Christmas and get some games in for sure.
Oh yeah, there's definitely lots and lots of room for everybody now.
Very cool. Well, if you out there in listener land want to reach out to us and say hi, or tell us about some fun games you played, or just share what's going on this Christmas season, how would you go about doing that, Chris?
Well, you can reach us on a multitude of social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter at CMDR Central. You can search us up on Facebook, CMDR Central. You can find us online at cmdrcentral.com, and you can also find us on YouTube by searching CMDR Central.
You can also head over to patreon.com/CMDR Central. Check out our reward tiers such as the Decks You Play show, or just joining our community to chat with us and play virtual EDH. We want to say hello and thank you to 2 new patrons, Nate B. and Brandon Gallego.
And we have a couple of giveaways going on that we'll wrap up on next week's show. Patron supporters on people on Twitter. You want to give us that information there, Max?
Yeah, so as long as you support us on Patreon by the end of this year, 2021, you will be entered in to win one of the following prizes: a sealed Plane Chase anthology, a sealed From the Vault Transformed, and a Grim Monolith from Urza's Legacy donated by listener and supporter of the show, Matthias.
Very, very cool. We'll be able to announce those on the show that airs next. So not this one, but the following one, episode 300, which we totally planned to have this big giveaway period wrap up on episode 300 on the last show of the year, because we're that careful in how we plot these things out in advance.
We're professionals.
That just all happened to work out very nicely. So, yeah, we'll have that next week. And we're going to do an AMA, an Ask Us Anything show for episode 300. So I'm going to put a form out to everyone who is one of our patron supporters on Slack, probably later today. We're recording this on a Wednesday. So we'll have several days to get us questions and things we can go over on episode 300.
Speaking of our
Yes.
patron supporters in our Slack, there is a channel called Chicago Meetup.
Mm-hmm.
Friend of the show, Sieb, is putting together a weekend in January 28th, 29th, and 30th, I believe. He has a convention room, like a big conference room for us all to go and hang out in Illinois and play Commander all weekend long. So head over, check that out, and see the details and figure out if you want to come or not.
Yeah, for sure. I believe I'm going. I'm not 100% positive. The only reason I wouldn't go is I have a work trip at some point in January, and I'm hoping it doesn't overlap. Max is definitely planning on going, I believe, and we're going to see if we can maybe convince Chris to take the trip down as well.
Yep, I've decided that if I do go, it's going to be a day trip. Like, I'll leave early in the morning and then leave later that night, because from my understanding, the drive for us is only like 6 hours, so it's not a big deal.
Yeah, it's not bad in Chicago. Yeah, very cool. I'm looking forward to that. Get some Commander in. I just want to throw this out there, too. The last episode of Commander's Brew that Andy Hull will be on just aired earlier this week. So, by the time the show airs, it'll have been, 10 days or so ago. The show is going to keep going on, and Andy's going to keep popping up on there. But I wanted to mention that because, that was one of the original Commander shows that was out there, basically. And Andy's been fantastic, and he was always a person willing to participate and do things with smaller up and coming content creators back when we were just starting. So just shout out to Andy for having done a lot of good work in the community, and he's kind of taken a step back from content creation. But I just wanted to mention that because it's a big deal. He was one of the early people. I remember kind of joking when we first were talking about doing a podcast that, hey, we have a pretty good shot at being the 4th best Commander podcast because there's only 3 of them right now. and Commander's Brew is one of those 3. So it was a big deal to be able to work with him and talk to him very early on. We did a thing called Atraxa Bowl where we built a bunch of Atraxa decks with the guys from Legendary Creature and Commander Social, which was Brothers War at the time, and Commander Cookout, 2017, I think that was, Max?
17 or 18, yeah.
Yeah, somewhere in there. And when we were all pretty small, and he participated in that, despite being a much larger content creator than we all were at the time. Just a good dude, and I just wanted to say something about Andy retiring, because he was an important part of this community for a lot of years. And still kind of will be on the fringes, but just not at the level he has been. All right, should we jump into the main show topic here?
Let's do it.
Do it.
The Rifties. So one note, this has always been kind of a moving target because, I think in the past we said the best card of the year. And that's so subjective because best, I don't know, what does the best even mean? So I think the way we decided to phrase it this year was just our favorite card of each individual category because that isn't necessarily the best. It might wind up being, we're going to do lands first and looking at Chris's. Chris is probably objectively the best pick power-wise. And it's actually a super cool card too, but best is subjective. So I think we're just going to be using, these are our favorite cards from each individual category. And one of the things we'll throw on the AMA for show 300 is we're going to give patrons their chance to throw their votes for their favorites as well. And so we'll go over that on the 300 show just to see what y'all out there have picked. So first things first, like I said, we're going to talk about lands. And since I teased Chris, what's your pick here for your Rifty for your favorite land from 2021?
My favorite land is also an enchantment, and it is known as Urza Saga. For those of you that don't know, Urza Saga is a saga enchantment land that came out of Modern Horizons 2, has your 3 chapters. First chapter allows you to actually tap it for mana. Second chapter allows you to pay 2, tap it, and create a 0/0 construct that has power, it gets +1/+1, so power and toughness equal to the number of artifacts you control. And then the last one is that you get to sacrifice this land on the 3rd chapter, and then you get to search your library for an artifact with CMC that's equal to 1 or 0. I believe that this is probably, overall, between all formats that I've seen, this is probably the most popular of the lands that's been printed this year. And probably the most powerful, right behind yours, Dana, because I think yours is really powerful too.
I mean, Urza Saga showing up in, Eternal formats is probably a pretty big signifier about how strong it is.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of things you can do to obviously go get a Soul Ring is a pretty solid play with it on the third chapter, but like you can also activate it to make the construct
Again, yes.
Again, a second time before you sacrifice it. It's just a super strong, super fun card that has popped up in a ton of places. I run it in at least one deck, if not two. It's a great card that's fun, and especially in Commander, it isn't particularly broken. It's just really, really good.
Yeah, because, I mean, you don't have, like, your deck's not built around having 4 copies of it that you can recur and do other, broken things within the deck. You only have one of, so it's not horrible by any means, but still the ability to just tutor out an artifact, on a whim, because it's like, do I remove use a removal spell on this or just let it destroy itself? I mean, it's kind of, hit or miss as to how you want to approach it.
Yeah, great card. And, Chris mentioned mine here. That's also very powerful. My pick is Treasure Vault. Artifact land as opposed to an enchantment land. Taps for colorless, and you can spend XX and tap it to sacrifice it and create X treasure tokens. I'm, number one, surprised this didn't come into play tapped, or that the treasure tokens don't come into play tapped or something. There's just almost no downside to this. It's not the kind of card I think you would want to run necessarily in a deck just like generically. Like, I put Homeward Path in a lot of decks just because there's almost always somebody stealing something and it's really, really useful. I don't think I want to throw Treasure Vault in decks generically, but in decks that care about artifacts or care about treasures or care about sacrificing stuff or whatever, like there's a ton of places this is really, really useful.
Anything that multiplies tokens, I mean.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's just a lot of uses for this card. Doesn't have a lot of downside. The decks where I run it, it's always been really, really good. Treasures are maybe too powerful, but like, as long as Dockside exists, this is not the most broken way to play that. Or old Gnawbones, and I think I saw Max make 30 treasures with him one turn on more than one occasion. So, super, super cool pick.
Oh, yeah.
And Max, what's your selection here?
Mine is the cycle of, I guess, slow lands from Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow, the ones that enter the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more other lands, and they come in all the dual land colors.
So those are interesting. It felt like everyone was kind of down on those at first. And I also remember last year when we got the MDFC lands, the true dual lands, not the ones that have a spell on one side, the ones that are, pick your color, basically.
Yep.
People were way super hyped on those. And I remember being like, I don't think they're necessarily as good as everyone thinks in Commander, mind you. Not that they're not good, but they're only fine. Whereas I think these are better than people thought at first. Like, they're just almost always an untapped dual.
Yeah. I definitely like these almost a little better than the Pathways. Are those the ones from Kaldheim that you had to choose one side or the other?
Yep.
I like these over that just because you don't have to make the choice.
Correct. Especially for myself, maybe that's less big of a deal for some people, but like for me who runs a ton of utility lands, I want my dual lands to make both colors. I want to have a choice. So for me especially, I really like this cycle a lot. I'm totally with you here, Max. That's a good pick. The one land I was also considering for this was, I liked Port of Carafel a lot. We got a cycle of uncommon lands that tap for a color, came into play tap for a color, and had some kind of an ability. The Port of Carafel one is the black-blue land from Kaldheim, and you can sacrifice it for 6 mana and bring a creature from your graveyard back into play. It's not amazing, but that's a pretty minor downside for a land that taps for colored mana. Yeah, you lose that 1 tempo hit if you're playing Dimir when it comes into play tapped, but then throughout the rest of the game, you just have a mana sink there available for you to bring back some crazy creature into play if you need to, at instant speed too.
Yeah.
I've got it in both my Dimir decks, and it's done really good work in both of them. It's not amazing, but it's really, really solid. And there's a couple other lands in that cycle that are pretty solid too. So I'm just generally a fan of that uncommon cycle.
Oh yeah, I think I have my lands picked for next year already. So Wizards better up their game because the Kamigawa basics might just take over that slot.
Just because they're so cool looking.
They are so awesome.
I was about to say, what lands do we know about? And then I'm like, oh, the basics.
Right, yeah, right. That took me a second too. I was like, what? Yeah, no, I mean, they look great. So we'll go to sorceries next. Max, you want to start us off here?
Yeah, so my pick for my favorite sorcery is one that I've actually been blown out by too many times to count, and this is Culling Ritual. This is 2 black and a green. This is from Strixhaven, and it says destroy each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less, then add black or green for each permanent destroyed this way to your mana pool. I've seen this come down on turn 4 and wipe out everybody's mana rocks. I've seen this come down on turn 12 and wipe out everybody's mana rocks, tokens, little creatures, and they just win the game because now they have 40 mana in their mana pool. This card is bonkers, and I need a copy of it pretty soon.
I mean, this is one of those cards that I feel like if you have black and green in your deck, it's really hard to not justify running it no matter what your deck is doing, no matter what the color combinations are. It's just so crazy strong.
Yeah, I gotta say, my Golgari deck, I don't play it in because I meant my Golgari deck to be really weak. But I probably should put it in there just because I need a little bit more removal in that deck. So why not make it a situational removal spell?
Why not make a removal spell that like costs you 4 mana and nets you 12 or something stupid, you know?
And then I can cast my 5 mana general that's probably died 3 times already. So
right, exactly. Well, speaking of that, Chris, what's your pick here?
My pick is called Blood on the Snow. It is a 6 mana, 4 generic and double black snow sorcery that came out of Keldheim. And it has, like a clause that you get to choose one or the other. And it's either destroy all creatures or destroy all planeswalkers. Really powerful, it's like a merciless eviction type of effect with, it doesn't give you the exile. But the stapled on text afterwards is what I deemed to make this probably my favorite sorcery out of everything. And that is that after you choose whichever one you're going to use, you get to return a creature or planeswalker card where converted mana costs X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the amount of snow mana spent to cast the spell. Snow mana is just easily, generic mana that you can put into your deck, so you're getting double value off of a 6 mana board wipe. I think it's phenomenal because I know a lot of people, even myself, still play Decree of Pain, I do believe it is. Mm-hmm. The 8 mana board wipe that lets you draw cards. So, I mean, this is a little bit less, but still allows you to do something after the fact as well.
I have had Blood on the Snow cast against me since it's been out 3 different times, and it was the same play every time. It was Blood in the Snow, bringing back Grey Merchant of Asphodel.
That's gross.
So it was like gross. And I think at least one of them, it was the same turn. So it was like Grey Merchant, everyone lose 11, Blood in the Snow, bring back Grey Merchant, everyone lose 11 again, or whatever it is. Like, it was just gross. So yeah, it's a blowout. In the right deck, it's just an absolute blowout.
I was thinking, in any deck that's running black with snow, I mean, if you're running 2 colors, run all snow basics, you can still return something, get just, incremental value is how I always want to play the game. So I look for cards like this.
It doesn't even have to be a creature or planeswalker that went into the graveyard this turn. It can just be one that, that's in your graveyard. It's like, that's it. So yeah. Super, super good. My pick is Rise and Shine, although I almost picked Color Ritual. It's super close. Rise and Shine is 1 in a blue. Target non-creature artifact you control becomes a 0/0 artifact creature, and you put 4 counters on each artifact that becomes a creature this way. I've never cast it for the 1 in the blue. I've always cast it for the overload cost, which is 4 blue. And then each non-creature artifact you control becomes a 0/0 artifact creature, and you put 4 +1 counters on it. Every time I've cast it, people have been like, what just happened? It's always been something stupid. It's always been a situation where my board state, and they're like, oh, okay, we're fine. Dana's not scary. Oh, he's got 9 4/4 creatures that are unblockable because of Veil of the Nightclad. Multiple times I've been able to animate, made token artifact lands with Prototype Portal and then turn them into creatures with Rise and Shine. Every time I cast it, it's just, it creates a ridiculous situation, and that's always what I look for in a card, where the card just, when you use it, it makes something dumb and fun happen. There's a lot more powerful cards that came out this year, but at least in my personal experience, in the sphere in which I've played, Rise and Shine has created the most oh my god kind of situation. So that's why it's my pick. It's caused a lot of fun and a lot of laughs, and that's what I like to see from a card.
Dockside Extortionist into Rise and Shine, or sacrificing your treasure vault into Rise and Shine. That's pretty gross.
Yes, so much stupid stuff. So that's my favorite. We will move on to our picks for artifacts now, and I guess I'll start us off since I'm already talking. This one was close. I'm a fan of Archaeomancer's Map. I've talked about it before. I think it looked good, and it's played just as well whenever I've cast it. I've loved Mask of Griselbrand whenever I've cast it. That card's been great as well. But consistently, both for myself and for other people, Nettlecyst, for being a card that no one really talked about at the time, Nettlecyst is just a bonkers strong artifact. It's 3 mana for a living weapon, so it comes into play attached to that 0/0 black germ. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact and or enchantment you control with an equip cost of 2. It's in 3 different of my decks so far. It's a great creature. It's a great equipment. It's just a great card. I've seen it cast a bunch against me, and you're like sitting there playing and like, okay, what are they going to do for 3 mana? Oh, they just cast a 12/12. Oh, they're just equipping it now to their stupid flyer, and I'm dead. Like, it's just a really, really good card that works a bunch of different ways. I've been really glad to see, like, there's so many cards that were super hyped from Modern Horizons 2, and even the cards nobody kind of cared about wound up being really good. That was just such a insane set. So my pick is Nettlecyst, but if you wanted to pick an artifact from Modern Horizons 2, you could have very easily gone with Chris's pick.
Yes, I picked Esper Sentinel. It is a 1-mana 1/1 in white that reads, whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card unless that player plays X, where X is Esper Sentinel's power. So pretty much it's going to sit there and just say, I'm going to tax you for 1 every time, if you want to pay it. Otherwise, I get to draw a card. Mono white needs card draw, and I think that's just a phenomenal outlet for it. Well, yes, it is easily removed. We discussed this on the spoiler show or whatever when we were discussing it.
Yep.
I still think it's too good not to be played. I really wanted to pick Nettlecyst as well, but I saw your notes on it. I'm like, okay, I'll look for a different one. So I picked this one. I've seen it played in Modern, Commander, and I'm pretty sure they're probably playing it in Legacy because it would not surprise me at all.
Sure. I mean, you only need to draw 1 or 2 cards off it. Like, if you draw 1 card off it, it's an Elvish Visionary. It's a cheaper Elvish Visionary, basically. Elvish Visionary is 1 in a green, I believe.
Yep.
So, like, you don't need to draw much value off it for it to be worthwhile, and very rarely do you just get 1 card off it. I think the best thing I've seen is I saw somebody play it, and the person immediately had to lightning bolt it. Like, oh, okay, well, as soon as it resolves on bolting it, draw your card. Like, it still worked. Like, okay, well, for 1 white mana, you got to replace it and remove a lightning bolt from the game. That's all right, too.
Yeah,
it just is almost always worthwhile.
Equip it with the Nettlecyst, becomes a 3/3. I mean, yeah, it's pretty good.
Right, yeah. Max, what's your pick here?
My favorite artifacts are the dual lands from Modern Horizons 2, since we're all going that route. No, kidding.
They're not bad. I mean, they're fetchable, aren't they? Those are the ones that we're thinking about, right?
No, these are the indestructible ones.
Oh, yeah.
So I had quite a few I wanted to pick from. Stuff from like Maskwood Nexus, which I've seen played against me. I considered Strixhaven Stadium just because that's kind of fun and just screams like kitchen table commander. I also considered Eye of Vecna because I've had a lot of luck with that in my decks. But the one I chose was Wand of Orcus. This was from one of the Adventures of Forgotten Realms precon decks. It's 2 and a black for an equipment with equip 3. Whenever equipped creature attacks or blocks, it and zombies you control gain death touch until end of turn. And then whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, create that many 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. I like that you could not even be running a zombie deck, and this still does something for whatever you equip it to, giving that creature death touch, on top of making a bunch of now zombies if you connect with that creature. I just think it's really cool, great utility, and I have it in a couple of my decks, one being my zombie deck and one being Regnan Krav.
And they're not even zombies with Decayed or anything. They're just zombies that are sticking around.
And they don't enter tapped.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. In the right deck where you have evasion, like you're very easily going to drop like 5 or 6 zombies pretty consistently.
Yeah.
That card's super good. All right, we will move down next and take a look at enchantments. My pick here isn't the most shocking. Unnatural Growth is just a crazy good card. It's 1 and 4 green for an enchantment. At the beginning of each combat, double the power and toughness of each creature you control until the end of turn. I actually like that it's 4 green. I also like that True Conviction is 3 white. I think it limits the amount of decks you can put it in. I definitely wouldn't want to run this in a 3-color deck, and I think 2-color decks is a little challenging. So you're kind of limited to mono green or 2-color decks at most. But it's a super good card. It's a win condition in a lot of different decks. It's a relatively affordable card. I mean, it's $10-ish, but like as far as win conditions go in green, that kind of thing can be pretty expensive sometimes. And this is a card you can get from a standard set that you can put in your elf deck or put in something like that and still have it be affordable. It's a really good card in a whole bunch of different places. And doubling stuff just is always fun. Like it just feels really powerful. Also, it's at the beginning of each combat. So like if you have a way to get an additional combat step, it doubles again.
Yep.
I don't know how often you can pull that off, but it's a fun thing to try to shoot for. So Unnatural Growth is my pick. The other one I kind of looked at here was Reflections of Litjara, which is the 4 and a blue enchantment. And when you cast a creature spell of a chosen type, you copy that spell. I liked that card quite a bit too, and I've seen it played or I've played it myself, but I just felt like Unnatural Growth was such a standout card. That's what I had to go with. So I went with that over Reflections. Chris, once again, probably went with the most maybe powerful card of the bunch here.
The cards that I picked are picks that I've had like personal experiences with.
Sure.
That's how I wanted to approach it more than, like looking at overall sets and everything.
Yep.
And the one that I picked is the Meat Hook Massacre. It's X and double black for a legendary enchantment, and it reads, when Meat Hook Massacre enters the battlefield, each creature gets -X until end of turn. Cool beans, it's an enchantment that, can board wipe, putting in an amount of X. The thing I like about it is the stapled on text would fit into multiple decks, and that is whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life, and then whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you gain a life. So you have that little, drain and gain aspect in there for more removal stuff. So, every time I've seen this card come out against me, I've just been, want to cry, because then it sticks around and you're like, oh no, now what kind of wacky stuff are they going to end up pulling? And then in Standard, I got blown out by it just recently, and I'm like, yep, I hate this card now.
And that's a card that's not just, that's all over the place, multiple formats.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, cards everywhere. What's your picks here, Max?
Mine is from Modern Horizons 2, and it is Sanctum Weaver. This is 1 and a green for an enchantment creature. It's a 0/2, and you can just tap to add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of enchantments you control. Who doesn't like Sarah's Sanctum on a body, especially for 2 mana? So I think this is a great pick. I have an Enchantress deck. Dana has one. Chris had one. They're a pretty popular archetype, and overall, in general, decks run enchantment, so you don't need a dedicated enchantment deck to probably get 3 to 4 mana off of this every turn if you put it in your deck that has green in it.
It being enchantment itself, so it always taps for 1, so it's not like it's a situation with Sarah Sanctum where you can have it in your opening hand and it doesn't do any good. If this is in play, it does tap for mana, like it just always works. Yeah, this card is broken dumb in an Enchantress deck. Like you play it and like, oh, I'm going to tap my Sanctum Weaver for 12. Like it's just stupid.
No, I did like that they gave a card out there to the general public, that can't pull off a Sarah Sanctum type of thing. But with they followed the rules where they didn't actually, print a card that's super similar to it, like a land that does something like that, like how they did with the Guy's Cradle reprint where it was an enchantment into a land. Instead, it's actual creature, so.
I'm surprised it just wasn't called Magus of the Sanctum, just to stay consistent with the previous naming conventions.
But that would be like the one Magus that is an enchantment creature.
That's
so,
true. Yeah, that's true.
My backup for this category was Monologue Tax, just because of it's good. It's not Smothering Tithe, but it's Smothering Tithe Junior.
You're gonna make Matt Morgan for the Truckcast mad because this was his pick for like his biggest bust of the year.
Really?
Wow. Yeah, he's gotten so mad at this card. He actually played it on stream last week and it didn't draw him a card for like 3 or 4 trips around the table. He's like, screw all of you guys. I am never playing this card again. He was so mad.
Oh well.
We were intentionally playing around it, but still, he was mad about it. I'll have to tell him you picked it, see what happens. That'll be funny. So we will move on to Instance, and speaking of my other show, the EDH Recast, since Max has upset Matt, I will let him make it up by making Joey happy with his pick for the best instant.
Yeah, so my favorite instant from the year of 2021 came from the Strixhaven Commander decks, and that is Ink Shield. 3 white and a black for an instant that says prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to you this turn. For each 1 damage prevented this way, create a 2/1 white and black Inkling creature token with flying. 5 mana Fog seems odd, but whether you're blocking 3 points of damage or 21 points of damage, you're making a lot of bodies that can either swing back the next turn because they have evasion and fly, or you can sacrifice them and do a bunch of combo shenanigans, or you can have your Krav, the unredeemed, eat them all and just swole and smash face. This is one of those cards now when I'm playing against Orzhov decks that I count mana. Do they have 5?
Yep.
And is it coming my way?
My favorite play I've done with an Ink Shield this year was someone was swinging at me for lethal. They had like a 20-something creature, and I was at 15 or something. Like, well, I'm going to swing at you. I said, well, before you move to combat, I'm going to use my Duelist Heritage to give your creature double strike. They're like, okay, why? And I'm like, well, I'm going to die unless I die anyway.
Oh, no.
All right,
Oh, no.
swing at you with my 21/21. I'm like, okay, Ink Shield? There's almost no situation. Again, it's a little bit like I talked about the Rise and Shine. There's almost no situation where you cast Ink Shield and everyone at the table doesn't go like, oh! It's just always stupid.
Did they not think that was a trap? I mean, come on.
Right, exactly.
It wasn't me, Chris. I'll tell you that much.
I wouldn't have fallen for that. I would have looked at you and be like, and I would turn to someone else and attack them then.
So, Chris, we'll move on to you here. What is your pick?
So instants were really hard for me. I looked through them all, and I didn't really have any that really spoke to me per se. So I just picked one of them that I was high on when it first came out, and that was Faithful Mending. For 1 white and a blue, you get to gain 2 life, draw 2 cards, and discard 2 cards. And it has a flashback for a colorless white and a blue. So it's pretty much Faithless Looting, but in white-blue that also nets you life. Overall, I haven't personally seen this card played in Commander. I've seen it played a lot in Modern, and I'm pretty sure it's probably going to see playing in Standard. Not sure how that meta's shaping up right now. But overall, I like this card. The rest of them, I just couldn't find one that stood out for me other than this one.
Yeah, in the right deck where you can play it, I mean, it's Faithless Looting, right? It does what that card does, almost better in some situations, and in colors that don't usually have access to that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I've only seen it cast a couple different times, but the discard thing in the right deck is an upside.
Yes, for sure. That's the big reason that's being played in Modern is because they're using it for pretty much the discard outlet of it. The 2 life's just incidental, but having flashbacks, you get to do it twice. I mean, it's perfect for where you need.
Well, my pick here is Stinging Study, also a draw effect. 4 and a black for an instant. You draw X cards and you lose X life, where X is the mana value of a commander you own on the battlefield or in the command zone. So it doesn't even need to be into play. And it doesn't need to be under your control. If someone takes your commander somehow, you can still cast this. 5 mana to draw. You probably want to run this in a deck that has a commander that's a 4-drop or a 5-drop or something. I don't know if I'd want to run it in a commander that was a 3-drop. But instant speed is huge in the right deck, and in the right deck, it's going to draw you just a full grip for 5 mana. So you lose a little bit of life. Who cares? Life's a resource. I've got this in, I think, 4 decks. I've seen it cast against me a bunch, and it just always feels terrible to, have someone before the end of your turn, I'm going to lose 6 life and draw 6 cards because they have a 6-drop commander that's sitting in their command zone. Unless you have a counterspell, you can't stop it. In the right deck, it's a huge card. Feels really good to cast, and I've just liked it quite a bit. The competition here was, I think, Resculpt in blue has been fantastic as a removal spell that also will hit artifacts, and I've liked Baleful Mastery a lot as a removal spell in black as well. So there's a couple cards I was considering here, but Stinging Study has done so much work. That's what I had to go with.
Thinking of that card seems really good.
Yeah. Max, what's your Planeswalker pick here?
Planeswalkers were hard for me this year. There weren't very many that intrigued me or that I even ran. So I went with one that I was going to play if I had built my Golgari Elves deck from earlier this year, and that's Tyvar Kell. It's 2 green for a legendary Planeswalker Tyvar. He comes in with 3 loyalty. His static is kind of why I picked him. Elves you control have tap, add black mana. And then he has 3 other abilities. His +1, you can put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target elf. Untap it, it gains Death Touch until end of turn. A 0 ability to make a 1/1 green elf warrior token. And a -6, which says you get an emblem with whenever you cast an elf spell, it gains haste until end of turn, and you draw 2 cards. The fact that his static lets your elves tap for black is huge compared to someone like Freyleys who just made the Llanowar elves themselves. 3 loyalty isn't great, but it's an elf deck, so you probably have a nice little wall of blockers up to take some of that damage. So that's my pick for favorite Planeswalker of the year.
That is a good pick because it's one of those cards that demands a really specific deck. You're playing black-green elves, and if you're not playing black-green elves, this is probably not a usable card at all. But in the deck where it's usable, it's flavorful and good, and you like to see it in your hand. So, I like Planeswalkers that feel they're for a specific deck versus ones that are, just generically good in any deck, basically.
Agreed.
And I think it also helps that Tyvar will be probably a little easier to get your hands on versus something like a Freyleys, which has only had 2 or 3 printings total.
Yeah. How about you, Chris? Do you have a pick this year?
I do. I didn't put it in our notes because it's a flip card, so I needed to be able to flip it back and forth.
Oh, sure.
So my pick is Arlen the Pack's Hope. This is a new card out of Midnight Hunt, I do believe is the set it came out of. I always get the two set symbols mixed up between Midnight Hunt and AFR. They look like the same. One's leaning down, one's leaning up, all that fun jazz. So Arlen has 4 loyalty when she comes into play. She's 2 colorless, a red and a green. And then there's Daybound, Nightbound. For those of you that don't know, it's just like the day and night back in original Innistrad, where you cast so many spells, you flip it back and forth, but it doesn't actually trigger until you actually start the cycle of playing a card that has Daybound or Nightbound. So the +1 on Arlen is until your next turn, you may cast creature spells as though they had flash, and each creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. -3, you create 2/2 green wolf creature tokens. Now when Arlen transforms to the Nightbound side, a +2 adds a red and a green to your mana pool, and a 0 reads until end of turn, Arlen the Moon's Fury becomes a 5/5 werewolf creature with trample, indestructible, and haste. So, I mean, overall, I think it's an extremely powerful card. I want to get my hands on one of the, the special border ones because I think it's a beautiful card as well. I just like the fact that it's another Planeswalker similar to there was the green Vivian that allows you to cast stuff at flash because, you're playing green, so you want to be able to have those outlets to, surprise, got this. But this one gives you bonus for when you do it because you get the tokens or the counters on it. And then when she does transform, you just turn her into a Gideon and start beating face.
I actually like it's a really good looking card too. That's always jumped out at me. In that border especially. And MDFC, or flip Planeswalkers at least, are always a lot of fun too. You have like twice as many choices. I like that thing. My selection here is Ren N7. Ren N6 was a crazy good Planeswalker. Ren N7 is really good too. 3 green, 4 abilities for a 5 loyalty Planeswalker. The first ability is reveal the top 4 cards of your library and put all land cards revealed this way into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. It's a way to get cards into your lands in your hand to play. It's a way to get stuff in your graveyard if you care about doing that. The 0 ability, put any number of land cards from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. Any number of land cards. That's fantastic in a landfall style deck. It can protect itself with a -3 where you create a green tree folk creature token with reach and its power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control. Again, in a landfall deck, that could be a -3 that makes you 14/14 or something pretty easily. And the -8, return all permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand, and you get an emblem with you have no maximum hand size. That's probably less amazing than some emblems or some big alt minus abilities, but it's still pretty decent. And maybe who cares if the first 3 abilities are that good? You just maybe don't care about that minus ability. It's just a really, really good card. And whenever I've played it, it's felt really powerful and rewarding. Whenever I've seen somebody else play it, it's felt like, oh, so much value there. So we also had a really cool Ren and 7 story this year. I know that doesn't maybe make the Planeswalker card itself any better, but I like the story a lot too with Teferi. So if you haven't read that, I would suggest seeking it out. It's pretty great.
Yeah, I did seek out the story about Olivia and Edgar.
That one was good too.
I was so confused. I'm like, how in the world is Chandra on Innistrad at this wedding? I'm like, is she an immortal? Are we back? Because I thought we were way, way back in time is how we were. And I was like,
sure.
What is going on here? And then one of my coworkers pulled up the story and he read through it and he's like, oh, I know what's going on. He had me read it. And I'm like, oh, well, that's not as cool as I thought it was going to be.
So non-legendary creatures next, just creatures in your deck. Max, start us off here.
This one was tough because there were 800 creatures to pick from.
You're not exaggerating.
No, that's the exact number from Scryfall. So I had a bunch that I wanted to pick from. Ironically, none of these I run. These are all cards I've seen played against me. So one was Goldspan Dragon, one was Archon of Cruelty, one was Archmage Emeritus. But the card I'm picking for my favorite non-legendary creature this year is Stormkiln Artist. 3 in a red for a dwarf shaman. It's a 2/2. It gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control, and it has Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, create a treasure token. Most red X decks like, casting instants and sorceries. They're part of the game, so why not just make mana off of doing that? I've seen this go off in Dana's Jury deck. I've seen it played against me in other decks where they aren't really doing treasure things, but it's just small incremental value throughout the entire game until someone takes care of this creature.
How do you know an uncommon is good when it costs almost $2?
So what is that? The one where you sacrifice a creature to draw a card or draw 2 cards and create a treasure token. I can't think of the name of it. It's like a $5.
I have it.
Yeah, that's like a $5 uncommon right now. It's
Deadly
that's
Dispute.
Crazy. Is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah, because it was my backup for instance.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's bonkers as well.
Well, speaking of bonkers creatures, Chris, what's your pick here?
My pick is Emrakul, the Wandering Archaic.
Basically, yeah.
So Wandering Archaic is a 5-mana 4/4 creature avatar that reads, whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery spell, you may pay 2 colorless. Or they may pay 2 colorless. Wow, even better. I should know this card because I get blown up by every time it hits the field. If they don't, you may copy that spell, and then you may choose new copies for that, targets for that spell copy. This card, every time that I've ever seen it played, it's used in a defensive stature more than anything, just to protect their board. So it's like, I'm going to cast this removal spell to remove this. And you're like, well, I'm going to copy it and remove that. Or I'm going to cast this counter spell to counter your thing. Well, I'm going to copy your counter spell to counter your counter spell. I mean, bonker stuff happens when this card comes out, and I love it. I have one, and I've yet to put it in a deck.
The way it messes with counter spells especially is really frustrating, because basically it turns off counter spells unless you have the extra 2 mana to spend.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people have this out, and then you're looking at your hand, and you're like, oh, well, I got this tutor in my hand to board wipe, but I don't think I want a tutor because they're going to get a free tutor out of this. I mean, it's just quite an annoying card to play against.
And supposedly there's a flip side to this card, but I'm not even going to read that, because who cares? No one's literally never, ever going to cast it.
I don't even know what it is, neither. Yeah. Do you want me to read it? Because I have it pulled up right now.
I mean, you can, but yeah, it's never getting cast for it.
Oh, it's not letting me flip it. Well, I can't read it. I'm sorry, everybody.
I got it. It's called Explore the Vast Lands. It's 3 generic mana to cast. Each player looks at the top 5 cards of their library and reveals a land and/or instant or sorcery card from among them, puts the cards they revealed this way into their hand and the rest on the bottom of their library in a random order, and then each player gains 3 life. Yeah, we're never casting that side.
I mean, it's not terrible, but like when Wander Archaic's on the other side, you're just never going to cast it.
Is there a lesson on the other side at least, so I can like tutor it out of my deck or something?
Negative.
Yep, not good. Not good at all.
just cast Wander Archaic and call it a day.
Yep.
My pick here is, I agree, like you could have easily gone with any of these. Archaic is great. Stormkill Artist is great. Max has a couple of things marked here as his backups, like Goldspan Dragon or Archmage Emeritus, all of which are fantastic. I've just seen a lot of dumb stuff happen with Academy Manufactor. It's the 3-mana 1/3 assembly worker, and if you would create a food, clue, or treasure token, instead create one of each. So, crack that treasure vault to make 4 treasures, and you also make 4 clues, and you also make 4 foods. It's just so stupid. I've just never seen it not come down when just a ridiculous amount of tokens didn't immediately follow it.
Play dockside into this?
Yeah.
5 million tokens? Oh.
Yeah. You say that, Dana, but it's funny. I've only ever seen you cast this card.
You never seen at least
never seen anybody else play this card
in his clue deck.
Okay, that would make sense.
So yeah, this is one that I've just always, whenever I've seen it, it's just always been funny. So it's one I like a lot.
I suppose this kind of limits, you need it in a deck that's actually going to create a certain amount of these type of tokens in order to get any value out of it. So it's probably limited where it goes.
The last category we have here is for our favorite commanders from this year. I mean, again, there's only 160 of them or something this year to pick from. So.
And my page is completely blank because I could not pick one. This is horrible.
Oh, see, I thought you had another flip one and I was going to guess.
No. This one, I looked through, started looking through them, and I'm like, I don't know. Like, because a lot of the commander decks that I've played against, they haven't been any, like, new cards. They've been older commanders still. So I don't even know based on the commander itself. Now, inside of the deck, I've seen a lot of good legendary creatures, but never at the helm. So I'm not sure.
I'm somewhat in the same boat. I tend to not build with new commanders. So the ones I was looking at were all from other people's decks or ones I've ran in the 99. But the one that does jump out at me, because I've seen it both as a commander and I have it in one of my decks, is Prosper Tomebound. 2 a black and a red for a Tiefling Warlock. He's a 1/4 with Death Touch. At the beginning of your end step, exile the top card of your library, and until the end of your turn, you may play that card. And he also has, whenever you play a card from exile, you create a treasure token. The problem, I guess, if anything, with Prosper would be he doesn't really suggest you build a deck. You kind of tend to want to just run maybe good stuff with him, or just use him as a value engine atop whatever combo pile you want to run with black and red or something. However, as someone who's cast Prosper multiple times in a deck or has seen Prosper be cast, it's such a little fun reward system. It's like, I've compared it to those mice in a lab experiment where if they push the right button, they get like a little pellet. Prosper just dispenses pellets. It gives you a free card, and when you play the card, you get a little treasure token, and it just feels good. It's just like a little reward for yourself. Like really, like whenever I've played Prosper, I'm like, oh, I get little treats now. I get a couple little treats every turn from Prosper. I just like that. It's just a fun card that rewards you for having him in play in just a nice little way. I just think that's cool. So when I've had Prosper out, it's been a lot of fun. When other people have had Prosper out, it feels like the same thing. Like they're just getting treats. So Prosper is my pick for just a super cool, fun commander that it's enjoyable to have out. As opposed to Max's awful commander that rewards you in the most gluttonous, gross way possible, Max.
That would be my good friend, Old Gnawbone. 5 green for a legendary creature dragon, 7/7. It flies, and then whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, create that many treasure tokens. As Dana alluded to earlier in the show, me making 30 plus treasure tokens and one combat step did happen. It was glorious. And
I'm assuming this is in Dramoka.
Yes, it is. And I love this card to death, and I kind of want to build a mono green deck around it and just do bad things with Helm of the Host and go.
Oh, that's naughty. You don't want to do that.
Yeah, I do.
I left the room when Max made like those 30 treasure tokens, and the game still went on for multiple turns after that, and I just kept hearing people yell at Max for making treasures. Like that's all I heard from the next room was just, "You what? How many treasures do you have left over there?"
Start blocking I believe was my response. Start blocking and I won't make treasures.
Oh,
yeah, because if you start blocking, I get to kill your creatures, and then you guys are just free game to just get nuked out.
I mean, Chris, there may have been a true conviction on the battlefield as well on my field, so I mean...
And that game still went on? What was going on with that?
So disgusting.
There were fogs, there were things, but I had to eliminate an entire table, so I had to do all the work. My back hurt after that.
Oh, yeah, that card is gross. I actually have it in my Recce deck, but I have not managed to get him out at a point in the game when it mattered. I think the last time I got him in play was I played him and then Alpha struck everyone that turn, so it didn't matter. Like I made a bunch of treasures, I guess, but everyone died. But yeah, you absolutely should make a mono green Gnawbone deck, Max. I would love to see that.
I'm off all this coming week. Maybe I'll pencil something together.
There you go. See if you can get it built for Chicago.
There we go. I could do that.
I like that. So any final wrap-up thoughts here, guys, just on the year in general? It was a year where we had a gazillion cards and a gazillion sets, and we've talked about getting burnt out a little bit. But ignoring that, like, what do you think of the product they put out this year? Was everyone pretty happy with it? What do you think, Chris?
I think they upped the power level quite a bit from the looks of it. Like, the cards all went up a little bit here and there. It made Commander more versatile as well, because you had so much that came out that it allowed for more play styles, more build styles, more wacky shenanigans that people could attempt to do. Half the time it didn't work out in their favor, and then they'd rebuild and do a different way. But that was awesome because Wizards gave so much product that you could do that instead of a limited selection. But for like us who are constantly looking at everything, I am so drained and so dead of it. I'm just like, ugh. And now I'm just like, hey, guess what? Kamigawa's coming, so let's start this over again.
Yeah, I mean, I am totally with you, Chris, about the amount of product being exhausting, and it's not really an option as easily for us to kind of skip it as it is for some people because we have to stay abreast of it for the show, but there is a lot of stuff, so I totally get that. It does feel like the quality of the product, though, in general, is much better than it was, I don't know, say 5 years ago, when we would get those core sets and you'd feel like it was an afterthought. It was mostly draft. It felt like a set of draft chaff cards, when you get like M14 or something. Or you'd get those middle block sets, those like Dragon's Maze or Fate Reforged sets that were small and felt like they didn't have much useful in them either. So you, as a content creator, had to pay attention, but you also felt like the product itself wasn't maybe that amazing. Everything feels like it's filled with like interesting cards nowadays.
Yeah, like I haven't seen any of those like little sets that are just annoying, to like go through anymore.
Yeah.
Seems like each set has a new flavor to it, and it makes the storylines better overall for everything.
I totally agree. How about you, Max? What are your thoughts on the year in general?
Wow, I am kind of at the polar opposite of you, Chris. I agree. Product fatigue was a thing, and I'm going to paraphrase a tweet Jason Alt sent out a month or two ago, and it said the best point of time for Commander was when WotC wasn't designing for Commander in every set. And I really agree with that, because I feel like I get it. Commander is the most played format. It sells packs, it sells singles, it sells the collector boosters, it sells the precon decks. But at the same time, that's 1,800 new cards we had to look at this year. All that, out of these 1,800, how many are actually going to probably get played in Commander? Not a lot. I kind of miss the days of the simple times where it was, your 4 standard products a year and 2 supplemental products, one in the summer and one in the fall. And then, that unset that never really tickled my fancy anyways. Like, I kind of miss those days. Instead of every 3 weeks, we are ending a preview season and moving into the next preview season because of some weird set called Jumpstart 3 is coming out, or
Right.
Battle Bond 7, and I don't think I'd feel different if I wasn't a content creator. I think I would still feel so overwhelmed that here's another 200 card set coming out 3 weeks after the 400 card set came out, and on top of that you throw in Secret Lairs and Jumpstart and unsets, and it's a lot. And for me, I'm not a fan. I do like a lot of the product that came out this year. I just think there was way too much for me to appreciate it all equally.
I agree with the sentiment, or I understand the sentiment, I should say, from you and Jason there, Max. I will say this. I do think they've fixed a lot of the complaints about designing for Commander, or at least gotten better about them. There was absolutely a window there where they were putting out cards, and I always pick on Tulane or Corvald, but they're so easy to pick on, particularly Tulane, but I think it's true of Corvald as well. Well, the problem there is they invalidate every other commander. There's almost no Bant commander that you can run, aside from something like doing a super specific thing like, say, Arcades. There's almost no Bant commander you're going to run where Tulane just isn't better. If you're playing Angel Tribal in Bant, Tulane's just better than Janara. Even though it's not an Angel. There's just situations. The same is true. Corvald wound up being a better landfall commander than any of your Jund landfall commanders. It just was better at doing the job because it's so good. So I think that was definitely a problem for a long period of time, or things like Arcane Signet being just an auto-include in every deck. I mentioned how Tulane is better than everything except for maybe Arcades. Well, that was a problem too, where they were just giving every single commander the ability to draw you a card just for existing. I do think in the last year or so, they've done a much better job of pulling back from that a little bit. So I understand the sentiment, but I do think they have course corrected quite a bit. We're no longer getting those kind of best in slot, automatically rewards you, Modrotha / Teysa Karlov style commander. So I do think they have fixed that a little bit, but I completely get the sentiment. And I think we're all in agreement it's a little bit exhausting. So we better drink our coffee, because it looks like 2022 is going to be off to the races as well here.
It's probably going to be worse.
Yeah. But hey, we get those awesome basic lands in Neon Dynasty, so
I know.
There we go.
So I also heard those basic lands, the hit rate on them is supposed to be poor, extremely poor. So we'll see exactly if it is or not.
One thing about that, though, on the plus side, too, we've had this thing where we've got a ton of really cool basic lands lately. However, they were so easy to kind of get that they maybe stopped being special almost.
Yep.
Maybe that's a good thing in this case. There's a bunch of basic land options, so many right now, that maybe it's okay to have some real low hit rate ones that are kind of special again.
I can get behind that.
They're not powerful. It's a basic land. You don't need to play them. It winds up being kind of a skin, and I think that kind of thing is maybe useful for the game, since it's easy to opt out and not miss out on anything other than the art. All right, that is going to wrap up episode 299 of Commander Central. We will be back next week, where we're going to do an AMA, and we'll read off our patron supporters' picks for their favorite cards of 2021 as well. Until then, I'm Dana. You can find me on the Twitter birds at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDRCentral_Max. And you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. Our show is edited by Rafael Garcia. You can find them on the Twitter birds at Ursa Bearwalker. And our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. Until next week and episode 300, I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.